Hey guys, tonight we begin with the charming, cosy, heartwarming world of 19th century factory life. You know, that magical era when children worked 14-hour shifts and the air quality could legally be classified as a weapon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first day as a 19th century factory worker begins the same way all industrial tragedies begin, with a bell. Not a gentle good morning chime. No, this bell rings like it's personally offended that you're still breathing. It's pitch black outside. The sun has refused to participate in what's about to happen. Even the rats are still asleep and they work night shifts. But you must rise. You peel yourself off a straw mattress that feels like someone angrily stuffed a potato sack with regrets and sharp objects. Your back cracks like an old wooden door. Your joints send you a message that translates roughly to, "Why are we doing this again?" Your breath forms a white cloud in the freezing air. That's right. You're so cold you're producing your own special effects. Your breakfast is yesterday's bread, which has achieved the density of a medieval weapon. You try to bite it and your teeth file an official complaint. No butter, no jam, no coffee, because caffeine is a luxury for the rich and the delusional. 19th century workers started their day fueled entirely by survival instinct and pure stubbornness. You get dressed in clothes that can only be described as historically uncomfortable. Every fibre feels like it was designed by someone who actively hated human skin. They're stiff, they're heavy, and they smell like the combined sins of every person who wore them before you, which is probably accurate because these clothes get washed approximately never. You step outside, ready to embrace the day, and immediately reconsider every choice that led you here. The air is a charming blend of coal smoke, chemical fumes, damp fog, and something that can only be described as industrial despair. Someone coughs nearby, and the sound echoes like a haunted accordion. A child runs past you, already late for their 14-hour shift because in 19th century England, childhood was more of a rumour than a reality. The street is slick with substances you don't want to identify. Your shoes, which are essentially cardboard lined with hope, soak through instantly. Congratulations! Your day begins with trenchfoot light. Then the factory bell rings again, this time louder, like it has taken your reluctance personally. You start walking faster, not because you want to, but because 19th century foremen are legally allowed to yell at you until your soul leaves your body. And the worst part, you haven't even reached the factory yet. You haven't seen the machines. You haven't inhaled the dust. You haven't met the foreman whose personality can best be described as unseasoned boiled potato. It's still morning, and already you're thinking, no, I will not survive this. I'm going back to bed. But you can't. Because the alternative to working 14 hours in a factory is starving, so you keep walking. Your commute to the factory is not a charming morning stroll. There is no sunrise worth admiring, no birdsong, no cheerful neighbour wishing you a lovely day. Instead, you step out into a 19th century street that looks like a deleted scene from a Charles Dickens fever dream. The fog is so thick it has physical mass, the colour of wet cement mixed with despair, and it carries the delightful scent of burning coal, rotting garbage, and unresolved respiratory infections. The ground beneath you is not a road so much as a muddy soot smoothie. Every footstep threatens to remove your shoe entirely, which would be tragic because 19th century shoes cost approximately 3 months of wages and provide exactly zero warmth or support. As you walk, you encounter the local wildlife. Rats the size of emotional support dogs. They don't fear you. They don't run. They simply look at you like, "Oh, you're headed to the factory? Rough." Even the rats pity you, and that should tell you everything you need to know about your situation. You pass rows of cramped houses where families of 10 live in 2 rooms, all of them sharing the same air, diseases, and questionable life choices. Laundry hangs limply in the damp air, dripping onto the street, because sunlight hasn't visited this neighbourhood since someone named George was king. And there have been several George. Children who should be sleeping or learning their letters or literally anything except this scurry past you clutching lunch pails. Some are as young as 6. 6. At that age today, kids are learning to tie their shoes. In 19th century England, they're learning how to avoid getting their fingers caught in machinery. Adorable in the most tragic way possible. The closer you get to the factory, the darker the sky becomes. Not because of natural weather patterns, but because of smoke. Actual man-made artificial night. Chimneys belch black fumes like dragons with sinus infections. And after 2 minutes in this environment, your lungs feel like they're aging in dog years. As you cross a narrow bridge, you look down and see the river. Formerly water, now an unidentifiable soup of chemicals, dyes, dead fish, and regret. It bubbles. Water should not bubble unless heated. You make a mental note to never fall into it unless you want superpowers or immediate death. Probably death. And then, just when you think it cannot possibly get more miserable, the factory bell rings again. Loud, metallic, and full of disappointment. Your pace quickens. Not because you want to, but because you fear the foreman discovering you're late. The foreman is a man whose personality is 90% anger and 10% hat. By the time you reach the factory gates, your shoes are soaked, your lungs are compromised, your mood is low, and your spirit is gently leaking out of your ears. And this was just the commute. You haven't even started your shift yet. After surviving the 19th century commute, a feat deserving of a medal you'll never receive, you finally approach the building where your dreams and spinal alignment will go to die. The factory. It rises out of the smog like a brick mountain designed by someone who really hated windows, oxygen, and basic human dignity. The structure is huge, imposing, and somehow manages to look both abandoned and overcrowded at the same time. Quite a feat, really. The first thing you notice is the noise. You don't see the machines yet, but you hear them. A distant metallic roaring that sounds like a thunderstorm being attacked by angry kitchen utensils. It's a chorus of clanks, bangs, whirs, hisses, and the occasional scream of a steam pipe releasing pressure in a way that suggests it's also emotionally stressed. Your ears attempt to resign from your body immediately. The factory doors themselves are heavy iron slabs, the kind of doors you'd expect on a medieval dungeon or a high-security prison. You hesitate to touch them because they radiate the unsettling energy of something that has seen things. Terrible things. Things involving fingers that are no longer attached to hands. Once inside, you're hit by a wall of heat, noise, and grime so thick it practically has its own personality. The interior is dim, lit only by small windows that are somehow simultaneously filthy and cracked beyond recognition. Dust hangs in the air like it's paying rent. Workers move through the haze like ghosts with employment problems. The floor is uneven and coated in oil, dirt, metal shavings, and substances you choose not to identify for your own emotional well-being. Every step feels like a gamble, and every gamble feels like a potential injury, which is accurate because that's exactly what it is. Your first instinct is to turn around and leave. Maybe run. Maybe relocate to a different country or possibly a different century. But no. The foreman has spotted you. He's a man carved entirely out of scowls, stress, and 19th century misery. His job is to glare at workers until they speed up, and he is excellent at it. He gives you a look that says, if you even think about going home, I will invent new forms of disappointment. You glance at the machinery and immediately regret every decision that brought you to this moment. Looms, gears, belts, presses, all enormous, all loud, all powered by steam and spite. Every machine looks like it's one poorly timed blink away from removing an important part of your body, and the shift hasn't even started. Standing there in the smoke, listening to a metallic orchestra of doom, you realise something profound. You do not belong here. Your body whispers, nope. Your lungs whisper, goodbye. And your heart whispers, is it too late to become literally anything else? But it's too late. Welcome to the factory. You're home for the next 14 hours. You might expect on your first day in a 19th century factory some kind of structured orientation, a friendly supervisor, a safety pamphlet, a demonstration video starring a cheerful man explaining basic precautions. No, absolutely not. This is the 19th century. The only safety orientation you're getting is, don't stand too close to things that spin fast and try not to die. Your training begins when a foreman points to a massive machine the size of a carriage and says, right, you operate that. That's it. Those 4 words are your syllabus, your handbook, your entire educational framework. You stare at the machine. The machine stares back menacingly. And somewhere deep inside, a little voice whispers, "It's been a good life." 19th century machinery is not friendly. It is not labelled. It is not colour-coded. It does not have a helpful emergency stop button. It's a tangled mess of gears, belts, pistons, and steam pipes, all screaming for attention, and occasionally spitting hot droplets at you like angry mechanical llamas. Your job is to keep everything running smoothly, which is optimistic considering you don't even know what half the parts do. Perhaps no one does. The machines were installed by men who are now dead, possibly killed by the very machines they installed, and the institutional knowledge died with them. A co-worker approaches you, an older man missing 3 fingers and the majority of his enthusiasm for life. This is your mentor. He shouts over the noise, "Don't let your sleeve get caught," then immediately turns away because frankly, that covers most of the curriculum. You nod politely, as if this single warning will protect you from the 18 other ways the machine plans to injure you. You try to pay attention to the motions of the workers around you, but they move with the speed and precision of people who have long since accepted their fate. They grab, pull, crank, feed, push, twist, all in a sequence so complicated it might as well be a dance performed as a warning to future generations. The foreman walks by again, glaring at you with the intensity of a man who believes inefficiency is a personal insult. He yells, "Faster!" even though you haven't yet identified which part of the machine is the work part. You'd love to ask questions, but questions imply curiosity, and curiosity implies you're new. And if they know you're new, they might assign you to a more dangerous station, like feeding raw material into the machine affectionately nicknamed the finger collector. Every second you spend in orientation lowers your life expectancy. Your pulse rises, your palms sweat. Your clothing becomes a liability, and your eyes dart around like you're waiting for a trapdoor to open. In this moment, standing before a monstrous 19th century machine with nothing but anxiety and finger counting as your guide, you realise your real orientation is not try not to die. It's try not to die yet. Now that you've survived orientation, which was essentially someone shouting, "Don't lose a limb" over industrial screaming, it's time to meet your new co-workers, the 19th century machines. These mechanical beasts are enormous, steam-powered, and built with all the empathy of a tax auditor during a famine. Modern machines beep politely, offer guidance, and stop automatically if you sneeze near them. 19th century machines, they operate on a very different philosophy, one that can best be summarised as, if it moves, crush it. If it doesn't move, crush it anyway. The first time you reach toward the machine with trembling hands, you notice the collection of warning signs around you. Not painted signs. Those didn't really exist yet. No, the warnings come in the form of your co-workers' missing fingers. One man is short a thumb, another is missing 2 fingertips, and the veteran working next to you appears to have lost something so long ago he can't even remember which part. Machines in this era were driven by leather belts spinning so fast they practically became philosophical concepts. One moment there's a visible belt, the next moment it's a blur capable of removing your sleeve, dignity, and arm in a single swoop. You try to keep your clothing tucked in, but 19th century fabric has no stretch, no flexibility, and no interest in teamwork. If your shirt catches on something, it's taking you with it. You attempt to focus, feeding raw material into the machine as instructed. The gears grind, the pistons pump, and every clank feels like a personal threat. The entire mechanism shakes the floor in a way that suggests it is held together solely by rust, hope, and passive aggression. Occasionally someone will shout a warning. Watch your hands, or mind the gears, which would be helpful if you weren't already fully committed to keeping every part of yourself intact. The problem is that 19th century machines do not care about your commitment. They sense weakness. They smell fear. And you? You're producing fear at factory scale. At one point your sleeve brushes just a little too close to a spinning cog. Time slows. You see your past life flash before your eyes, including memories you didn't even know you had, like that time you cried over dropping a sandwich. You jerk your arm away just in time, and a co-worker nods in approval, as if you've passed a very dark rite of passage. You hear that one machine in the corner is nicknamed the Nibbler. You do not ask why. you don't want to know. The machines themselves seem to have personalities, not friendly ones, more like the personalities of ancient gods who demand sacrifice. One loom clicks in a rhythm that sounds almost like laughter. Another hisses steam at irregular intervals, as if it's telling you secrets in a language you can't quite understand but instinctively fear. The cotton dust, if you're in a textile mill, floats through the air like malicious snow. It gets into your eyes, your nose, your throat, your lungs. Within an hour you're coughing. Within 2 hours, everyone around you is coughing. It's a symphony of respiratory distress, accompanied by the percussion of industrial machinery. If you work with metal, the experience is somehow worse. Flying sparks, superheated fragments of metal, and the constant threat of something heavy falling on your foot. Your boots, thin leather affairs that wouldn't protect you from a stern glance, certainly won't save you from a dropped iron beam. The machinery doesn't just threaten your body, it threatens your sanity. The repetitive motion, the same task performed thousands of times per shift, turns your brain into something resembling pudding. Pull, feed, crank, release. Pull, feed, crank, release. Over and over until you're not even thinking anymore. You're simply moving through muscle memory, a human extension of the machine itself. And the machines are never grateful. They don't acknowledge your service. They simply demand more, faster, constantly. They break down at inconvenient moments, requiring you to reach into their mechanical entrails with nothing but your bare hands and a prayer that they don't suddenly restart. By midday, you understand why 19th century workers never became attached to their fingers. The machines wanted them more, and the machines always got what they wanted. Take a deep breath. Actually, no, don't. Not in a 19th century factory. The air inside this place is not air. It is a hostile substance, a mixture, a cocktail, a 19th century smoothie of cotton dust, coal soot, steam, oil vapour, and the faint aroma of everyone else's suffering. From the moment you walk in, your lungs file a complaint. Each inhale feels like you've accidentally consumed a handful of gravel. Each exhale feels like a negotiation between life and poor decisions. Breathing becomes a strategic choice, rather than an automatic one. You look around and realise the atmosphere has texture. You can see particles floating. Cotton lint if you work in a textile mill, metal dust if you work with machinery, or coal soot if the factory is powered by a steam engine that looks one spark away from a national disaster. These particles swirl through the air like they're enjoying their freedom at your expense. Within minutes, your throat is dry, your eyes are watering, and your lungs feel like a poorly maintained accordion. 19th century workers called this sensation normal. Modern doctors would call it, you need to get out of there immediately. But no, your shift is just beginning. Workers around you cough constantly, not small coughs. The kind of coughs that echo across the factory floor like dying bears. You hear deep rattling wheezes that sound like someone trying to start an old lawnmower. No one covers their mouth because everyone is too busy clinging to consciousness. And if someone coughs something solid, well, that's between them and the nearest priest. The factory floor is hot too, steam powers everything, so the temperature hovers somewhere between uncomfortable sauna and slow-boiling beef stew. You sweat instantly, which would be fine if the sweat didn't immediately combine with soot to create a new element. 19th century paste. A sticky black coating on your skin that never fully washes off. Your lungs grow heavier. The deeper into the factory you walk, the worse it gets. By mid-morning you're trying to conserve oxygen like a Victorian monk practicing industrial meditation. You've invented 3 new coughing patterns, and you're starting to see shapes in the haze. The machines, the foreman, or perhaps just your will to live leaving your body in visible form. And there's no escape. The windows are sealed shut because opening them would let the outside air in, and fresh air is a luxury reserved for people not currently sweating on factory floors. The owners claim it would disrupt the machines. In reality, they just don't want workers getting ideas about what breathable air feels like. The air quality varies depending on what the factory produces. Cotton mills fill the air with fibres so fine they're invisible, until they've already colonised your respiratory system. By the end of a shift, you'll cough up cotton balls. Actual cotton balls, your body trying desperately to expel the invader. Chemical factories are worse. Dyes, bleaches, acids. The air burns. It physically burns your throat and nose. Workers in these facilities often develop mysterious rashes, nosebleeds, and a persistent metallic taste that no amount of bread can eliminate. Coal-powered facilities coat everything in black dust. By lunch, you look like you've been mining underground. Your face, your hands, the inside of your nose all black. You become a moving shadow, indistinguishable from your co-workers except for the unique pattern of grime accumulated in the wrinkles of your face. Some factories use toxic substances without knowing they're toxic. Lead paint production, mercury in hat making, arsenic in wallpaper creation. Workers develop tremors, memory loss, personality changes, but nobody makes the connection. They just call you clumsy, forgetful, or temperamental. The factory continues operating. You continue deteriorating. By the time you reach midday, you don't need a doctor to diagnose you. You need a time machine. This isn't air. This is the Industrial Revolution's way of telling you, go home, if you still have one. If you thought the air was trying to kill you, wait until you hear the soundtrack of 19th century industrialism. The factory noise is less background ambience and more constant, unrelenting psychological assault. It doesn't simply echo, it occupies space inside your skull like it's paying rent. The moment you step onto the factory floor, the sound hits you like a brick to the face. The machines roar, clank, grind, whir, hiss, and bang in a chaotic symphony that would make even a heavy metal band say, okay, that's a bit much. It's not just loud, it's aggressive, violent, the kind of noise that doesn't fade into the background but becomes the background of your nightmares. Your ears immediately begin to protest. They try to fold themselves shut. They attempt to resign. They consider immigrating to a quieter part of your head. But 19th century factories have no quiet parts, only louder parts and far louder parts. Communication's impossible. If you want to speak to the person next to you, you must scream with the intensity of someone confessing a lifelong secret. Most of the time, they still don't hear you. The machines drown out every sound, including your internal monologue, which is honestly a blessing because your internal monologue is currently screaming. You'll try at first to protect your hearing. You'll cover your ears, you'll tilt your head, you'll pray. None of it works. The noise goes through you like the factory is trying to communicate directly with your bones. 19th century workers didn't have earplugs. The closest thing to ear protection was stuffing cotton into your ears, which is also what caused half the hearing problems in the first place. The cotton would absorb moisture, compact itself, and occasionally introduce infections. So you could choose between going deaf from noise or going deaf from infected ear canals. Freedom of choice, 19th century style. As the hours drag on, your brain begins to adapt. Badly. You start imagining patterns in the clanging, like the machines are sending you threatening Morse code messages. One piston makes a noise that, if you listen long enough, resembles laughter, and that's when you realise the machines aren't just loud. They're mocking you. Your nerves fray. Your shoulders tense. Your sanity loosens. Time becomes irrelevant. Your thoughts blur into one continuous plea for silence. But the machines do not care about your suffering. They are fueled by steam, coal, and spite, and they will keep screaming until the end of your shift or the end of civilization, whichever comes first. The noise has physical effects beyond hearing loss. Your head begins to throb, not a gentle headache. A pounding, relentless pressure that feels like someone is slowly tightening a vice around your skull. Your teeth hurt from unconsciously clenching your jaw against the assault. Your entire skeleton vibrates at a frequency that makes you wonder if bones can simply decide to quit. Different machines contribute different notes to this hellish orchestra. The looms create a rapid-fire clicking that burrows into your brain like an insect. The steam engines produce a low, rumbling roar that you feel in your chest. The metal presses slam down with percussive booms that make your heart skip beats. Together, they create something that can only be described as acoustic violence. You notice that the older workers lip-read more than listen. They've been here so long that their hearing has simply surrendered. They nod along to conversations they can't hear, responding based on context and educated guesses. Some have developed elaborate hand signal systems, a sign language born of industrial necessity. The children working in the factory seem less affected by the noise, at first, but watch them closely, and you'll notice they flinch at sudden sounds. Their nervous systems are being rewired by constant auditory assault. They're learning to exist in a state of perpetual startled alertness, like rabbits in a field of wolves. 19th century workers often went deaf. Slowly, progressively, inevitably. You're going deaf immediately and possibly emotionally too. By the end of hour 1, you don't just want silence, you want revenge. Against whom, you're not entirely sure, but someone is responsible for this auditory nightmare, and you intend to file a strongly worded complaint. Just as soon as you can hear yourself think again. Just when you think the machinery is the worst thing in the factory, something far more demoralising enters your field of vision. The supervisor. 19th century supervisors were not hired for their communication skills or emotional warmth. No, they were selected for qualities such as chronic unhappiness, the ability to glare through walls, and a voice that could cut through industrial noise and hope simultaneously. Your supervisor materialises out of the steam like an underpaid Victorian ghost. His posture is rigid, his expression is bleak, and his eyebrows seem permanently stuck in the "I'm disappointed in you" position. You don't even know him yet, but somehow you already feel like you owe him money. His clothing is simple: dusty trousers, a waistcoat, boots that have stomped on many dreams. But what truly defines him is his authority aura. This aura radiates stress. Workers straighten up as soon as he walks by, moving with the speed and panic normally reserved for natural disasters. The foreman doesn't smile, he doesn't blink, he just judges. His version of encouragement: faster. His version of constructive feedback: you're doing it wrong. His version of empathy: we don't pay you to think. He approaches you slowly, like a predator who's disappointed he has to chase his meal. You try to act natural, which is difficult because you don't know what natural looks like when surrounded by death machines. Sweat drips down your back. Your hands shake. You consider making eye contact, then immediately regret the thought. Eye contact is how he detects fear. When he finally speaks to you, it's not a greeting. It's a warning disguised as a question. Is that the best you can do? Your soul leaves your body briefly. He points at your machine and shouts tips that are not tips. Don't jam it, and keep it moving. You nod obediently, even though you have no idea whose fault it is when the machine suddenly decides it hates productivity and stops for fun. Around you, seasoned workers move with robotic precision, pretending they're not terrified. They've been here long enough to know that the supervisor senses weakness the way sharks sense blood. And in the rare event someone slows down, maybe they're injured, maybe their soul just left for a moment, the supervisor's voice cuts through the factory. Do you want to be replaced? The answer is always yes, but the paycheck says no. The supervisor has a notebook. He writes things in it. Nobody knows what things. Production numbers, probably. But also possibly judgments about your character, your work ethic, your soul. The notebook is more frightening than any machine because it represents the power to fire you, and being fired means starvation. He watches you throughout the day like a Victorian spectre of judgment. Sometimes he stands behind you, saying nothing, just breathing disapproval down your neck. The psychological pressure is almost worse than the physical danger. At least the machines are predictable. The supervisor is not. Some supervisors carry sticks, not to hit workers, that would be assault, but to gesture dramatically, to point at things, to occasionally bang on machines that aren't working properly. The stick is a symbol of authority. It says, I could hit you, but I don't have to, because you'll work faster just from fear alone. You realise in this moment that you could survive the noise, the dust, even the machinery. But the supervisor? He is the true villain of the Industrial Revolution, a man whose entire existence revolves around making sure you never ever feel comfortable or valued. And he's very, very good at his job. You might believe, as a modern human with rights and hydration needs, that a lunch break is a moment to rest, regroup, and maybe regain the will to live. In the 19th century factory, however, a lunch break is simply the period during which you continue working while chewing something vaguely edible. The bell rings, signalling this sacred window of nourishment, and by sacred I mean roughly 15 to 30 minutes depending on the factory's generosity, which is to say, not very generous at all. The machines don't stop, you don't stop, your existential dread doesn't stop. The only thing that pauses is your hope. Your lunch is whatever you could carry in your pocket or lunch pail without it liquefying. Yesterday's bread, now slightly fossilised, a cold, wrinkled potato. a piece of hard cheese that could double as a weapon. Or if you're exceptionally lucky, a small portion of cold porridge that has achieved the consistency of wallpaper paste. You pull it out with trembling hands, blow a fine layer of factory dust off it, and take a bite. Delicious? No. But it contains calories, and that's enough. Some workers don't even have lunch. They simply work through the break, too exhausted to eat or too poor to have brought anything. 19th century workers didn't sit down for meals. Sitting would imply rest, and rest would imply humanity. Instead, everyone stands at their machine, hunched over like goblins, eating their sad lunches while avoiding moving parts that could easily turn a meal break into a medical emergency. If your bread falls on the floor, you face a moral crisis. Do you pick it up? Do you leave it? Do you cry? Do you accept this as a sign that lunch is over? Most people pick it up. 5-second rule. In the 19th century factory, it's more of a 5-second glance to ensure no rats beat you to it rule. The noise continues, so deafening that you can't even hear yourself chewing, which is a blessing because 19th century food does not make pleasing sounds. Your jaw works overtime, trying to break through bread that could double as a construction material. Meanwhile, bits of dust float into your food, adding a gritty crunch that no cookbook could ever justify. Occasionally someone tries to exchange a small joke or weary smile with a coworker during lunch, but the noise drowns everything out. Laughter is forbidden, not by rules, but by the environment. If you manage to grin, it's mostly because your brain is losing oxygen. Some factories don't provide water. You're expected to bring your own in a tin container. By lunchtime, the water has acquired a metallic taste and possibly some floating particles. You drink it anyway because the alternative is dehydration, which in combination with heat and dust leads to fainting, and fainting near machinery is not recommended. The children working in the factory often eat even less. Their lunch pails contain scraps, sometimes just crusts of bread or a small boiled egg. They eat quickly, mechanically, their eyes already glazed with the exhaustion of working hours no child should work. Then, just as your stomach begins to understand that food has arrived, the supervisor stomps past and bellows, "Break's over!" Your soul collapses. 20 minutes have passed. Your potato is unfinished. Your jaw is tired. Your spirit is tired. And you now have another 11 or 12 hours of work ahead of you. Welcome to 19th century lunch, where sustenance is optional, but suffering is guaranteed. And if you complain, even silently in your own mind, the supervisor somehow knows. He always knows. By the time the afternoon rolls around, your energy is gone. Not low, not tired, but entirely missing. Like it packed a small suitcase, slipped out the back door, and moved to another country. Your body is now operating solely on instinct, fear, and whatever microscopic nutrients were in that cold potato you inhaled during lunch. The machines do not care. The supervisor does not care. Even time itself seems to be dragging its feet, refusing to move faster because it enjoys watching you suffer. Your arms ache from repetitive motions that haven't changed since sunrise. Your back feels like it's auditioning for a tragedy. Your legs are trembling. Your fingers, they're numb. And numbness is both comforting and terrifying in a workplace where losing a finger is considered a mild inconvenience. This is the part of the day when 19th century workers entered what historians politely call the afternoon slump, and what you might call the final collapse. Your eyelids grow heavy. You begin to sway slightly, not because you're dancing, but because gravity is trying to negotiate your surrender. Every minute feels like an hour. Every hour feels like a personal attack. Your brain, starved for stimulation beyond clanking metal and the foreman's disapproval, begins to drift. You imagine yourself somewhere peaceful, lying in a grassy meadow, sitting by a quiet river, or simply being unconscious in any decade that isn't this one. Then your hand slips, you jolt awake, and you're reminded that the machine you're operating can remove large sections of your body if you daydream too hard. Around you, everyone else is suffering the same collapse. Some workers move on autopilot, their eyes glazed over like overworked Victorian owls. Others are pale from hunger. A few look like they're communicating with spirits out of sheer exhaustion. But no one stops. They can't. The machine keeps moving, so you must keep moving. Because stopping means introducing your limbs to 19th century engineering. And 19th century engineering is not forgiving. It doesn't ask questions. It simply removes whatever gets too close. your mind starts asking strange questions. How long have I been here? What even is time? Is this shift ever going to end? You check the clock mounted high on the wall, visible through the haze. You think 3 hours have passed. You're wrong. It's been 27 minutes. Your stomach growls, your spine compresses, your soul evaporates. The dust in the air seems to be getting thicker, or perhaps your vision is just failing. Either way, everything has acquired a soft, fuzzy edge, like you're viewing the world through dirty gauze. Some workers develop tricks for staying awake. One man slaps himself in the face periodically. Another pricks his finger with a pin he keeps in his pocket. A woman near you recites multiplication tables under her breath. Anything to keep the brain engaged enough to prevent total shutdown. The afternoon is when most accidents happen. Fatigue makes people careless, reactions slow, attention wanders, and the machines, ever patient, ever hungry, wait for exactly these moments. The supervisor knows this too. He circles the floor more frequently in the afternoon, his presence a reminder that exhaustion is not an excuse for poor performance. But still, the afternoon refuses to end. All you can do is keep working, keep breathing lightly because the air is toxic, and hope the bell eventually shows mercy. Spoiler, it won't. Not for many, many hours. The afternoon stretches before you like an endless desert, and you're crawling across it on your hands and knees, searching for an oasis that doesn't exist. At some point in the afternoon, right when your soul has fully left your body and your muscles are functioning through sheer spite, you notice something horrifying. Nobody reacts when someone gets hurt. Truly, absolutely nobody. A man several stations over catches his hand on a spinning belt. There's a yelp, a blur of motion, and suddenly he's missing a finger. A single finger. Not enough for a break. Not enough for sympathy. Not even enough for paperwork, because paperwork doesn't exist yet unless it's a bill you can't pay. He wraps what remains of the finger in a rag he probably washed last during the reign of someone named George, mutters something that is definitely not polite, and simply keeps working. You stand there in shock, clutching your fully attached hand, thinking, surely this warrants a pause. It does not. 19th century workers have 3 reactions to catastrophic injuries. A grunt, an insult directed at the machine, continuing the shift. Meanwhile, you stubbed your toe earlier and nearly filed for early retirement. Another worker gets her hair caught in a gear. The machine snarls. She screams. The foreman yells. Not out of concern, but because lost productivity is the real tragedy here. They cut her hair free with a knife someone happened to have in their pocket, hand her a cap, and she returns to work as if she merely spilled tea. You watch all of this unfold like you're witnessing an alternate universe, where human pain is merely an annoying scheduling conflict. Burns are even more common. Steam pipes hiss like angry geese, and when they release pressure unexpectedly, they scorch everything within range. Arms, faces, optimism. Workers respond by swearing, shaking their arm, then getting back to feeding the machine. Because if you stop, it will absolutely find a way to punish you for your hesitation. Occasionally, someone gets pulled into a machine more seriously. The line stops for a few minutes, not for rescue. No one here is trained for that, but for extraction. During this pause, workers use the break to stretch, wipe sweat, or take a bite of their bread rock hybrid from lunch. It's the closest thing anyone gets to a moment of peace. The injuries are varied and creative. Crushed hands, severed fingers, deep lacerations, chemical burns, eyes damaged by flying debris, broken bones from falling materials. Each injury has its own story, and each story ends the same way, with the worker returning to their station because the alternative is starvation. Some factories keep a basic medical kit, and by medical kit, I mean a bottle of whiskey and some bandages. The whiskey serves as anaesthetic, antiseptic, and emotional support, all in one convenient bottle. Apply liberally to wound, drink the rest to forget about the wound. And your supervisor? His emotional response ranges from irritated to bored. He's seen too many injuries to care. In fact, he probably uses them as informal teaching moments. That's what happens when you lose focus. Back to work. The implied message is clear. If you get injured, it's your fault for not being careful enough. Never mind that being careful is nearly impossible in this environment. you suddenly realise the terrifying truth. Injuries aren't accidents here, they're occupational features. 19th century workers build resilience, you build panic, and the shift continues, relentless as the machines, uncaring as the supervisor, inevitable as death itself. The factory doesn't even have what we would recognise as a doctor on site. At best, there's someone who once helped birth a calf and now considers himself medically trained. His prescription for everything. Rub some dirt on it and get back to work. Modern medicine has not reached this place. Modern medicine doesn't even know this place exists. You've been working for what feels like 14 lifetimes. The machines are still roaring, your body is held together by sweat and delusion, and your soul has long since wandered off to live a quieter life somewhere in rural France. But then, miraculously, the bell rings. For a brief, transcendent moment, you feel something close to joy. The sound is shrill and metallic, but to your battered 19th century brain it's Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Your entire body surges with relief. Your fingers unclench, your spine uncoils slightly. You smile for the first time since childhood. The shift is over. You did it. You survived. You're free. Or so you foolishly think. Because as you turn to leave, already fantasizing about collapsing face first into your straw mattress, your supervisor appears. His silhouette blocks the doorway like a Victorian eclipse. He clears his throat in the way a man does when he's about to ruin your year. Overtime, he announces, not as a suggestion, not as a negotiating point, as a decree. Your smile dies instantly, falling off your face like loose plaster in a condemned building. Overtime is not optional. Overtime is not paid extra. Well, sometimes it's paid extra, but only in the sense that you might receive an additional halfpenny for several extra hours of labour. Overtime is simply the universe saying, congratulations, you thought you were done. Adorable. In the 19th century factory system, if the machines are running, you are running. If the machines need more output, you need fewer boundaries. So the bell that moments ago sounded like a celebration now feels like a practical joke. You return to your station with the posture of a medieval peasant being marched to the stocks. Every part of your body is screaming. Your knees wobble. Your wrists feel like they're made of molten candle wax. Your shoulders? Gone. They belong to history now. They're a memory, a ghost of the person you were 14, hours ago. 19th century workers rarely complained. They couldn't afford to. You, however, begin bargaining with the universe. If I survive this, you whisper, I will never complain about Wi-Fi again. A bold promise, considering your survival odds are dropping like the value of 19th century air quality. The overtime drags on and on and on. The light outside fades. The windows darken. Not that they were doing much anyway. Your internal clock breaks. The only rhythm left in your life is the machine's dangerous heartbeat and the supervisor's occasional bellowing. Other workers accept the overtime with the resignation of people who have no choice. Some need the extra pennies desperately. Their families are starving. Rent is due. A child needs medicine. So they stay, pushing their bodies past all reasonable limits, into territory where exhaustion becomes a kind of transcendence. The children working in the factory suffer most during overtime. Their small bodies weren't designed for 14 hours of labour, much less 16 or 17. Some fall asleep standing up, swaying dangerously near the machinery until a co-worker nudges them awake. Others cry silently, tears making clean tracks through the dirt on their faces. The factory owners have calculated that forcing overtime is more profitable than hiring additional workers. Why pay for more humans when you can simply extract more labour from the ones you already have? It's the same logic used to work draft horses until they collapse. Except horses receive more compassion than factory workers. Finally, after hours of extra labour that were definitely not in your imaginary contract, the bell rings for real. This time, no one celebrates. They simply shuffle out, too numb to feel anything. You walk toward the exit thinking one thing. If this is the best of all possible worlds, someone needs to have a serious conversation with whoever's in charge. Possibly with pitchforks. When your shift finally ends, after enough hours to make time itself feel tired, you stagger out of the factory like a ghost who died from overwork and is now confused about how haunting functions. The air outside should feel refreshing, but this is 19th century England, so it mostly feels like breathable coal. Still, anything is better than the factory. Your legs are jelly, not smooth, elegant jelly. No, more like the lumpy, suspicious jelly Victorian children dreaded at Christmas. Every step sends shockwaves up your spine. Your feet throb inside your shoes, which by now have absorbed so much moisture they legally qualify as soup. The street is dark, not nighttime dark, industrial dark. A thick fog rolls in, carrying the smell of burning coal, rotting trash, and someone coughing aggressively 3 streets away. You take a deep breath out of habit and immediately regret it when your lungs threaten to unionize. The walk home should be simple, except nothing in the 19th century is simple. The cobblestones are slippery, uneven, and seem to rearrange themselves specifically to trip you. You grip your coat around you, though it provides warmth only in the emotional sense. Children, yes, children, walk beside you. They also just finished their shifts. Their tiny bodies carry tools bigger than their hopes. A 7-year-old casually passes you, looking fresher than you do, and you feel shame. He's on his way home to help his family with chores after a 14-hour shift. You're barely managing to remain vertical. Rats scurry across your path, bold as ever. One looks you dead in the eye, and you get the sense that it is judging you. It probably had a more productive shift than you did. It certainly looks cleaner. You pass polluted rivers, collapsed wooden fences, overcrowded tenements, and the occasional man yelling at a chimney for personal reasons. Your body aches everywhere. Your arms feel like wet rope. Your throat burns, your elbows hurt, and you didn't even know elbows could hurt independently. The streets are full of other workers making the same trudge, a silent army of the exhausted, all moving in the same defeated shuffle. Nobody speaks. What would they say? Lovely shift today. Everyone is trapped in their own private hell, too tired even for commiseration. Occasionally you pass a pub. Golden light spills from its windows and you hear laughter inside. Some workers stop here, spending their meagre wages on gin or beer, trying to drown the memory of the day before facing the reality of tomorrow. You understand the temptation, but you also understand that ale costs money, and money is something you have very little of. Street vendors still work at this hour, selling dubious meat pies and hot chestnuts. The smell is tempting, but you've already spent your food budget on that brick of bread you choked down this morning. Tomorrow's breakfast is uncertain. Tonight's dinner is even more so. Halfway home, you start fantasizing. Not about food or rest. Those are long-term dreams. You fantasize about sitting. Just sitting on anything, a stool, a crate, the curb, a damp Victorian cabbage. You would sit on anything. But no, you must keep walking, because if you stop, the cold will set in. And the cold in this era is the kind that tempts you into a lifelong nap. By the time you reach your street, your soul has filed for bankruptcy. You have aged decades. Your shadow looks tired, and this is only day 1. 19th century workers did this every single day, 6 days a week, 52 weeks a year, for their entire working lives, which were often tragically short. Tomorrow you will never want to get up again. Unfortunately, you will have to, because the bell will ring, and the bell always wins. You finally make it home, or at least to the building where you temporarily store your body between factory shifts. Calling it a home is generous. Calling it structurally sound is optimistic. Calling it livable is downright fictional. What you actually return to is a cramped tenement room where privacy, comfort, and breathable air have all been removed for efficiency. The moment you step inside, you're struck by the smell. It's a complex blend of damp clothing, cold soot, boiled cabbage, and the faint but persistent scent of too many humans sharing not enough space. If you bottled it, you'd have a fragrance named Despair Number 5. Your room is small, so small that if you stretch out your arms, you might accidentally become part of someone else's family. Your bed is a pile of straw that crunches ominously, like it's storing secrets. Half of it is permanently flattened from generations of exhausted workers collapsing onto it. The other half has an unsettling lump that you hope is straw but suspect is something historical. You share this room with several other people, siblings, parents, cousins, or complete strangers who wandered in at some point and never left. Space is a suggestion, not a reality. Everyone gets about 1 square foot of personal area, which 19th century society considered luxurious, because technically it is more than you have in the factory. Conversation is impossible, Not because of noise, but because everyone is too tired to produce language. Instead, the room is filled with quiet groans, occasional coughing fits, and the soft scratching sound of a rat family in the corner, who also pay rent by virtue of simply refusing to leave. You try to wash up, but the communal basin contains water that looks like it is already retired from cleanliness. Still, you splash your face with it, hoping it will revive you. It does not. It simply makes you wet and disappointed. The water is cold, of course. Hot water is a luxury reserved for people who don't work in factories. Dinner is whatever you can afford, which is usually bread, thin soup or something, boiled so long it no longer remembers its original identity. Tonight, if you're lucky, it's potato peels floating in watery broth. If you're unlucky, it's yesterday's potato peels floating in yesterday's watery broth. You eat mechanically, staring into the middle distance like a person emotionally rebooting. Your family, if they're here, eats in similar silence. The children look at you with eyes too old for their faces. They're already working in factories themselves, or they soon will be. The cycle continues. As night falls, the room becomes colder. You huddle under a thin blanket that has the insulating power of a damp napkin. Someone snores. Someone coughs. Someone mutters in their sleep about the foreman. These nighttime sounds are the soundtrack of industrial England. You lie there, staring at the cracked ceiling, one thought drifting through your exhausted mind. If this is home, what exactly was hell supposed to look like? Tomorrow you'll rise before dawn and do it all again. The bell will ring, your body will protest, and you'll shuffle back to the factory because the alternative, starvation, is even worse. This is life in the 19th century industrial age. Not living, but surviving. Not thriving, but enduring. Day after day after day, until your body breaks or your luck runs out. Welcome to progress. So, here you are, lying on your lumpy straw mattress, your spine negotiating surrender terms, your lungs filled with enough factory dust to qualify as a new mineral deposit. You've survived your first day as a 19th century factory worker working 14 hours. If we stretch the definition of survived to include still technically breathing but spiritually deceased. Now, it's time to answer the question. Could you survive working 14 hours a day in a 19th century factory? Let's review everything you've endured. You woke up to a bell that sounded like it hated you personally. You walked through a neighbourhood where every puddle was a biological hazard. You operated machines designed during an era when safety regulations were considered witchcraft. You inhaled air with the nutritional value of chimney soot. You ate lunch while actively trying not to get devoured by moving parts. You endured a supervisor whose hobbies included glaring and emotional damage. You worked overtime you didn't agree to, weren't paid for properly, and couldn't mentally survive. You trudged home through a landscape that looked like the Industrial Revolution was losing an argument with gravity. You slept in a room so overcrowded it might legally qualify as a jar of human sardines. And tomorrow, you get to do it all again. 19th century factory workers weren't just tough. They were forged from suffering and necessity. Their bodies adapted to the noise, the filth, the hunger, the danger, and the complete absence of things like minimum wage, weekends, or basic human rights. They didn't thrive. They endured. Endurance was the only metric available. Their children started working as young as 5 or 6 years old. Entire families worked in factories, passing their exhaustion down through generations like a cursed inheritance. Some workers spent 40 or 50 years in factories if they lived that long, which many didn't. The health consequences were devastating. Respiratory diseases were epidemic. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, bronchitis, all flourished in the factory environment. Workers developed bent spines from poor posture, damaged joints from repetitive motion, and hearing loss from constant noise. Chemical exposure caused mysterious illnesses that doctors couldn't diagnose: lead poisoning, mercury poisoning, arsenic exposure. Workers would develop tremors, lose their hair, experience personality changes, and die without anyone understanding why. The connection between workplace exposure and illness wouldn't be made for decades. Life expectancy for factory workers was brutally short. Many died in their 30s or 40s, their bodies simply worn out. Those who lived longer often couldn't work, becoming a burden on families who could barely support themselves. There was no retirement, no pension, no social safety net. When you stopped working, you stopped eating, and the factories themselves evolved over the decades, but not always for the better. As the 19th century progressed, some reforms did come. Slowly, reluctantly, child labour laws began restricting the youngest children from the most dangerous work. Factory Acts limited hours for women and children. Safety guards were added to some machinery. But these improvements came at a glacial pace, driven by reformers who fought against factory owners every step of the way. Each regulation was treated as an unbearable burden on business. Each safety measure was resisted. The invisible hand of the market, it turns out, was perfectly happy to crush workers if it increased profits. Modern humans, by comparison, can barely tolerate slow Wi-Fi, lukewarm coffee, or phone batteries dipping below 20%. Imagine telling a 19th century worker that people today complain when their office chairs don't have lumbar support. They would stare at you, stare at the chair, and then politely ask what support means. Let's be brutally honest. Your lungs, gone by noon. Your hearing, eaten by machines in under an hour. Your fingers, the machines want them more than you do. Your mental health. It evaporated at exactly 3:17 p.m. Your will to continue left your body sometime between the overtime announcement and the third coughing fit. You would not survive a day working 14 hours in a 19th century factory, and that's not an insult. It's a testament to how unbelievably hard their lives were, and how unimaginable that level of endurance is to us now. They didn't have a choice. You do. And you chose to watch this video from a warm room, on a comfortable device, while sitting on a chair that probably does have lumbar support. Congratulations! You already live better than a 19th century factory worker on their best day. The Industrial Revolution built the modern world. But it was built on the broken bodies of millions of workers who never saw the benefits of progress. They powered the machines that powered the factories that powered the economy, that eventually created the comfortable world we inhabit today. Every time you flip a light switch, every time you buy something made in a factory, every time you benefit from modern manufacturing, remember, it was built on the suffering of people like the ones we've described tonight. People who worked themselves to death so that future generations might live better, and they did. We do. But we should never forget the cost. The 19th century factory floor was hell, and millions of people lived there, day after day, year after year, their entire lives consumed by machines and noise and dust. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep in your comfortable bed, in your temperature-controlled room, breathing clean air, spare a thought for them. The nameless, forgotten millions who built the modern world with their hands, their health and their lives. They couldn't survive what they endured, but somehow, impossibly, they did, and that makes them far stronger than any of us will ever need to be.